Welcome to TRF Tuesday. This is Trauma Research Foundation's weekly mini workshop series from Bright Voices in Therapeutic Embodiment. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. It's the way to tell YouTube that this content is valuable and they'll show it to more people. So thanks for joining Sexual Grief. Bring the mind and body into sync with hostage negotiation techniques. Today's session is entitled Engage with the Cognitive Interrupters, the S.T.O.P method. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to our facilitator, Edy Nathan. Edy is a thought leader and certified sex therapist specializing in trauma and grief. She works with businesses, universities, and long-term care homes to help people understand how these areas filter through their lives and affect everything from creativity to productivity. Working together, she offers creative ways to deal with grief, trauma, and sexuality. Edy, thanks for being here. Go ahead, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mary. It's great to be here. And, sexual grief. So what is it? You might not have heard of it, and that's okay. So let me share a definition. And if you've got a paper and pen, or you want to use your laptop, whatever, just write this down so that you've got a place to mark it, because it is a new term. It's new. Sexual grief is a natural response to an unnatural sexually traumatic event. I'm going to say it again. Sexual grief is a natural response to an unnatural sexually traumatic event. Now that's expansive, right? You see, sexual grief forms a kinship with sexually traumatic events. Sexual abuse can be one of those events, but it could also be along a developmental timeline. And that timeline is expansive from the time you are born to the age you currently are. So I'd like you to think about, an unwanted child might very well, as they enter into adolescence and adulthood, experience sexual grief, menopause or aging for both men and women. They might experience sexual grief. The girl or the guy who have a first sexual experience that just doesn't go well, they might experience sexual grief. So it's a natural response to something that happened that we couldn't control, that was external or internal. And I hope that lays the ground and the pathway for us to understand and for you to understand what I'm talking about here. Now, one of the things that happens is we're kind of held hostage by the pop-in memories that come in when we're in a sexual grief state of mind, state of being. It affects our bodies, it affects our memories, it affects so much. And what I've learned is that these hostage negotiation strategies really help to open up a pathway and a role that is very, very specific to you healing or listening to or conversing with those aspects of you that might know or face sexual grief. So I would also like to define hostage here, just so we are all on the same page, and then we're going to do a deep dive into where we're going. And if during this time you've got any questions, though we're not going to take the questions right now, please put them in the chat and we'll answer them at the end of this session. I look forward to hearing all of your thoughts, feelings around what came up for you, or what you learned. So hostage. A hostage is defined as someone who is held prisoner by an enemy. And hostages feel like they're out of sync. They feel like sometimes they can't think straight. They feel scared. And The hostage taker usually wants something. Now, in the case of sexual grief, if we think of sexual grief as a hostage taker, what does sexual grief want? It wants to be listened to. And how do we normally respond to sexual grief? Let's push it as far away out of the field as we possibly can. Hence the strategies for hostage negotiation. Now, we are in the fourth strategy, if you will, of hostage negotiation techniques. I would like to share just one thing before we move on. I may use imagery or say something that might be triggering. If in any way it is, if I lead you into something that feels uncomfortable, I want you to please self-protect. Don't go there. Stop the exercise, because this is not about making you in any way feel uncomfortable. And I'm going to trust that you will listen very carefully. And if anything feels uncomfortable, that you shift. And maybe you wait, or maybe you shut off your mic for your earphones for a little bit, just so you can gather yourself and then come back, because I will probably have moved along. Okay, great. So let's just talk about cognitive interrupters. Now, what is a cognitive interrupter? Well, when there's sexual grief and it wants to come and take over, there's a lot that's going on in our brains. And so what we want to do is we want to interrupt those negative cognitions. Those are thoughts, right? And we want to replace them with more positive cognitions. Those are thoughts in the brain, but we're changing the cognitions. And so this is going to be an exercise that's going to look at the body, the mind, and anything that you might be able to access externally. And I'll explain as we go along. Okay. So this is what we're going to do. I want you to pull up a memory that maybe isn't like a great memory, but it's not a triggering memory. Or maybe a pop-in moment that might have been a little bit anxious for you. And I want you to think about that. And it's safe enough for you. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to just land in your body for right now. I want you to put your hand on your chest. That's right, right here. That's right. And I want you to take in a breath. That's right. And I want you to let it go. I want you to feel yourself grounding yourself before we move into this. I've prepped you, you know where we're going, but this is a time in moment. And time in moments are very different than time out moments. You're not being punished, you're asked to go inside. You're going to do that one more time. You're going to take in a breath, putting your hand around your heart, and you're going to let go, and I am safe. Good. And now, what I'd like you to think about is, what would a negative cognition be? And I'm going to give you some hints, like, I can't go on that date. I am powerless. I don't feel good about myself. I am a negative person. Okay. Now, those are negative cognitions. Those are negative cognitions. And I want you to write your own down, maybe just one, when you think of some memory. It could be something that maybe you regret, and it's not a big deal. It's just something that's around and has caused you or did cause you to have that negative cognition. That's right. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is I want you to think about where is that in your body? And I'd actually like you to put your hand, if you can, for where that negative cognition is. A lot of times my negative cognitions are right here in my heart, but sometimes they're in my gut. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes they're in my feet. So if you can't reach down, just imagine that you are having some kind of contact, and even with your feet. Maybe they're in the head. Sometimes, for some people, they're in the throat. I know sometimes when I'm really stressed and I've got a negative cognition going on, I lose my voice. So then put your hand on your throat. Now, what I want you to do as you are doing this body exercise, wherever your hand tends to be, I want you to think about what that negative cognition is as it relates to an image. And now I want you to turn it around to a positive cognition. And those positive cognitions, and I'm going to give you an idea. I love myself. I'm fine the way I am. I can trust my own judgment. Those are just examples. I'm not going to tell you what's right or not right for you, but you get the drift, right? Good. Now find that place in your body and give it. Imagine energetically you're giving it in your body that positive cognition. And sometimes it helps to think as if we're saying that positive cognition with respect and with honor, but sometimes it is a very young, tender spot. So say it with love. Imagine just saying it with love. That's right. It can even be, oh, I love this heart, even though sometimes it goes into those negative cognitions. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And now, the next piece that we're going to do is the mind, because the mind likes to play around, and it loves to come in and do a dance with you. And that dance with the negative cognitions, it just pushes at you. It pushes. And sometimes it's really hard to get rid of, like the thoughts and sexual grief and the pop in memories that happen. Sometimes it's hard to shut that down. So I'm putting this in terms of sexual grief, but the hostage negotiation here is that you have the ability to create a shift. And you're creating a shift with the hostage taker, sexual grief, and the kinship it has formed with sexually traumatic events. That's right. So we're breaking that kinship. We're breaking that kinship. That's right. So now, I want you to just shake off everything else that you've done so far. Shake, shake, shake. And actually, believe it or not, in the body, this is a positive cognitive interrupter. And breathe. I might even put some voice to it. That's right. My ring might fall off too. So, good. Move your shoulders. That's right. You're opening up the mind. You're opening up the mind. And I would just love for you to imagine right now that you've got a negative cognition and it's floating in the sky. Okay. And there's this rainbow. I mean, it's an amazing rainbow. And you're going to pull one of the colors from the rainbow. I don't care what color it is, whatever color you want. And you're going to wrap it around the negative cognition. But now that ribbon has changed from just circling the negative cognition to unconditional love. And there's nothing to break a kinship that we've been talking about than unconditional love. And wrap it and wrap it and wrap it and wrap it until it's almost like a safe cocoon. That's right. That's exactly right. And now, let it go. And as you see it just releasing, another string comes down from that rainbow. And imagine that it's either around you or you're just holding it or you just imagine it. And now that thread, that string from the rainbow encircles you. That's right. So now what I'd love for you to do is just hold on to that positive cognition. That's right. So now we're going to go to the STOP method. And this STOP method I love because it really gives you a certain amount of insight and power. Now, obviously, STOP, S-T-O-P, is an acronym. The S stands for a sensory scan. The T, you can write this stuff down, stands for tension release. The O is opening the heart, which we've just experienced. And the P is pause with purpose. Now, some of this we've already done, right? We've already done some of this. But now you've got an acronym that really marries very well, integrates very, very well with the cognitions, the cognitive, the negative cognitions, and the positive cognitions. So now let's talk about sensory scan. So a sensory scan, I'd like you to imagine, and I want you all to know, I'm going to use an image of an MRI machine, but I'm not asking you to imagine that you're in it. I want you to imagine that you've actually got the powers to scan your body like an MRI machine that can just kind of really take in a lot of information. And the more you do this kind of scanning for yourself, guess what? You have a chance to pick up, oh, this isn't feeling right, or this feels great, or wow, there's a shift. And you're looking for all sorts of information. And when you can track it, you have begun this STOP method. Because scanning, it's doing a sensory scan is really, it empowers you. When there's a pop-in memory, when there's a grief that's happening, such as the kinship that we've been talking about. Okay. So now we're going to talk about tension release. Now, tension release, the first thing you just did a sensory scan, and maybe you want to go to that place where the negative cognition was. It doesn't matter. You can go there, or you might want to try a new place. So do that sensory scan. And now I want you to imagine where you felt a tightness, an edginess, an emotion. I want you to imagine, if it's not like your stomach or your fists or your throat or your jaw, that you are actually tightening maybe that organ, or you're imagining that it's just tighter and tighter, and it's just holding and holding this tension. And what happens when there's a lot of tension? Eventually, it's got to release. And that's what opening the heart is. Opening the heart is part of the tension release. So when you start to release where you've assessed, oh, there's tension there, and then you open that part. You're also opening your heart. And when you open the heart, it helps your mind and your body get back into sync. Because there's nothing like what we've been talking about today that will make you feel like you're out of sync, like you don't know where you belong. And this STOP method is really about bringing it in, bringing you together, bringing it back home to you, to your solid sense of self, to the part of you that's great, just the way you are, to the part of you that can laugh and giggle, and to the part of you that can also mourn and then laugh and giggle. And it is being able to find the fluidity. So now I want you to do this movement. It's like a figure eight. It is the sign of infinity. And I want you to breathe. And we are doing the sign of infinity, where one thing ends, another thing begins. It is life. It is rebirth. It is growth. It is fear. It is joy. It is change. It is knowing that you can flow and negotiate for freedom. And you might need people to help along the way, and that's okay. And this exercise, your arm's hurting yet? This exercise is actually wonderful, and it's great to do also with a partner, and see if you can mirror one another, and see how you can maybe just look at one another and not even know that you're mirroring each other. And now I'm going to stop and taking a breath. And I want you to move your hands back and forth like this. Feel the warmth. And allow your hands to go on your face. And I'd like you to use one of your positive cognitions right now in this moment before we close. And breathe. And breathe. And I want to thank you for being here today and for joining on this journey. And I can't wait to hear all about what happened for you in the chat. Thank you so much.
All right, we have a few minutes left for questions, if anyone would like to ask any questions. I would start out with saying, just how is the sexual grief approach different from sort of normal approaches to this type of trauma?
So sexual grief has never really been identified as a trauma. And so because of that, I don't mean to be sketchy in the way that I'm answering this, but I actually think it's a way for us to label more accurately what some of the experiences are that have been pushed together with the experience of trauma and PTSD. And so this is an opportunity for all of us here to begin to have a different label that is not about I'm a survivor and I've got PTSD, but rather I've got some sexual grief I'm dealing with, and it's not an illness, it's a form of grief, and I'm yearning to have a different.
Makes sense.
And I hope that answered your question, and if it didn't, please write again in the chat and I'll try to re-clarify.
Well, that one was from me, but it did.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Someone's asking what resources are available to continue further study with your teachings.
Could you just say that one more time?
Sure. What resources are available to continue further study with your teachings?
So you can certainly go onto my website, edynathan.com. And if you want more information, there's a way to contact me. You can certainly put your email, but there's also like a contact form. And I'm hopefully going to have a book out at the end of 2023, yet to be named. But obviously it's going to be about sexual grief and the very things that we've been talking about. Yeah.
And if people want to follow Edy's book journey, I've placed it in the chat. There's a link there that you can take a look at what she's working on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if there are stories, I know Mary sends out like a review sheet. If there are things that you want to hear more about, put that in that sheet, because I then have the ability to respond to you and start a conversation. And that's what this is all about. Let's open this door. Let's have a conversation that we haven't been having. So you are my teachers, and for that I am eternally grateful. So please just take a moment of your precious time and write something that you might want to explore or want to know more of, or anything else that comes up or came up today.
Yeah.
Someone's asking, we do have, or just about out of time, but if you'd like to, someone's asking if you could talk a little bit more about the infinity hands in the last part of the exercise there.
Yeah. So funnily enough, I don't know about you all, but I can still feel the vibrations of it in my hands. And the idea of infinity is that we are all going through this infinite period of time. And it is a forever kind of experience. And I find that the infinity that you are always, when you're doing it, there's that point where you cross, and it's a threshold. And I'm a big believer in crossing of thresholds and of facing ourselves. And that every time you do that, it's like you must cross some threshold. And it means that you take yourself on, but it also means that there's continuity and there's a continuing journey of exploration and curiosity.
Okay, we are out of time. I don't see any more questions either. But thank you so much, Edy. I don't know if you want to give us a little insight into what to expect next week.
Oh, next week. Absolutely. So I have it all down here. Let's see. So next week, mind and body, dancing in sync. Identify and name your warning label. And that is what we're doing next week.
Thank you, Edy. Thank you for another thoughtful session. We're learning so much. Thanks to our audience for joining us. Please share the series. You can find past sessions on our website in the TRF Tuesday library. Behind the scenes, thanks to our TRF staff, Pat Murray, Star Muhammad, Connor McCann. I'm Mary Frangie. We look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, be well. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.